Hello, and welcome back to Teaching Statistical Thinking with Social Media. In this video, we'll use social media examples to help facilitate student understanding of visual representations comparing two categorical variables. In your videos with Dr. Stengel, you learned about mosaic plots and how they can visually represent two categorical variables. For most students, mosaic plots are not part of the high school mathematics curriculum. However, they are derived from contingency tables, which appear frequently on mathematics and of course exams, as well as in courses in the sciences. In this video, we'll discuss contingency and frequency tables and how you can help your students create and interpret them. In the first part of this video, I model how a contingency table can be explained and taught in your classroom. In the second half, I describe an individual activity that asks students to create and interpret a contingency table using their personal social media data. Now, a contingency table is just a two-way frequency table, meaning that it's a frequency table comparing two categorical variables. Contingency tables can display both the general frequency, which is how many times an observation repeats, but it can also say the relative frequency, which is the percent of the whole represented in a cell of a table. If you go ahead and click the link below, Jump will show you an example of a contingency table that has both the general and the relative frequency. When teaching contingency tables, it's best to start small, like the size of your classroom. As a warm-up, I like to take a poll of the classroom because it gets the kids active. First, ask the students to put up a number 1 with their left hand if they play sports, and a 2 if they don't play sports. You can substitute this with any other example. I just pick sports because a lot of my students enjoy them. So as they're keeping the left hand up, with their right hand they're going to put up a 3 if they like watching sports, and a 4 if they don't like watching sports. So our two categorical variables are playing sports and watching sports. In this instance, I'm holding up a 2 because I don't like sports. I don't like playing sports, and a 4 because I don't like watching sports. So I would go in that bottom right-hand corner of my frequency table. After this, you'll have this information tallied on your frequency table on your board. Next to it, you're going to make a relative frequency table. So you're going to convert each group's population to percentages and make a relative frequency table there. Make sure you note to your students that the percentages add up to 100 in the bottom right-hand corner of your table. So for this activity, we're going to examine Twitter users by country and by whether or not they use their cell phone to tweet. To prepare students for this activity, you might want to ask them how many students they think use Twitter in their school, and then convert that to percentages as a class. Then, ask them how many students they think use Twitter on a phone versus on a computer. Convert that to percentages too. Explain that you're showing them some data that highlights how many Twitter users in the US use their phones compared to in the rest of the world. We could include all the countries we have data for, but first, we're just going to start with the US and other and build up from there. This is a simple table, but it provides an easy example for teaching and is very much like the tables that students see on their end-of-course exams. After you display the data, ask students what they see and make sure they understand that what the table is representing. Explain to students that this is an example of a relative frequency table, and from it we can answer and ask some very important questions to help us understand Twitter in the US and across the world. With our table here, I'm going to go ahead and walk you through some scaffolded questions that you can ask your students. The first question is pretty straightforward. It's just what percentage of active Twitter users were both mobile users and from the USA. All this requires the student to do is to look at the frequency table and select the correct number. So this one will be in the top left-hand corner. The second question is going to be a little bit more complicated. It's going to ask them what percentage of active users were not mobile users. This requires students to add up the non-mobile users from both the USA and other categories, and the percentage will be at the bottom of the screen. So this next question requires students to use conditional proportions to find the answer. It asks, of the mobile users, what percentage are not from the USA? What they need to do from this is find the total percentage of the users that aren't from the USA, and divide it by the percentage of mobile users to get their final answer. Be sure to spend extra time on questions of this nature, especially with lower performing students. They really struggle with percentages and they need your help in order to comprehend this. So lastly, this question asks about conditional proportions in the other direction on the frequency table. It says, of those from the US, what percentage are not mobile users? What this requires a student to do is to find the total percentage that aren't mobile users, that's on the top right part of your frequency table, and divide it by the total percent of users from the US to get your conditional proportion. So one last question. This is going to be a bonus question. It's not going to directly relate to conditional proportions, but it's really important because it's going to show up on end of course exams, and it's a percentage question, which is what a lot of students struggle with. Here's the question. It's pretty long, so stick with me. The population of the US is 314 million. There are currently 255 million active Twitter users. Assuming each is a unique individual, determine the percentage of the US population that consists of active Twitter users. The first thing you want to do with this is go step by step with your students. I would start with the number 255 million because our frequency table is about Twitter users, and this is the total number of Twitter users. When we look at our frequency table, we see that 24% of active Twitter users are from the US. So we're going to take that total number, 255 million, multiply it by 0.24, and then we're going to divide that by the total number of people in the US, which is 314 million. So we have 255 times 0.24 divided by 314. We're going to multiply that by 100 to get a percent, and we get about 19% of the US is using Twitter right now. This makes a couple assumptions, one of which is that they're all unique people in the US, where we know that sometimes there's organizations or people have multiple Twitter accounts. So that's something you might want to talk to your students about later. All right. We've also attached a larger relative frequency table so that you can tailor questions to your students' readiness. Just adjust the other category as you change the number of countries you use. The table includes 2 countries with abnormal entries, Indonesia and Saudi Arabia. Indonesia has a disproportionate percentage of non-mobile users, and Saudi Arabia has a disproportionate percentage of mobile users. Use these abnormalities to create questions about outliers and to encourage students to research why these abnormalities exist. Obviously, you can also doctor this data set to your specific classroom needs as you confer different statistical concepts regarding categorical data. Now I'm going to walk you through a student-directed Twitter stats activity that can help your students better understand a frequency table. This activity can be done in any classroom where at least half of the students have a Twitter account, or you can break them up into 3 if less students than that have a Twitter account. There are many websites where you can enter your Twitter handle, which is also known as your username, and receive graphs and data of your tweets broken down by month, day, and hour. We will use the website tweettails.com and its neighbor site tweetdownload.net as our example sites. And we're going to use the Twitter handle @DukeU, which is just Duke University's Twitter account. Depending on your setup, students can work in pairs or as individuals. The data they will need will be presented in bar graph form on tweettails. A list of all their tweets can be retrieved from tweetdownload.net. This activity is going to require them to create frequency tables and answer questions related to these tables. In this activity, you'll have students access and show their Twitter usage by categorical variables. The 2 variables we're going to use are weekday and time period of the day. That means for time period, before school, during school, or after school. Here are some possible questions to walk students through this activity. So the first thing you're going to ask your students to do is create a general frequency table from their data using the day of the week and the time of day as their 2 categorical variables. Find the totals for the days of the week and the times on tweettails, and then fill into the individual cells by counting tweets and the time frame on tweet download. Tweet download is going to have the timestamps for them so that they can put each of their tweets in the individual cells on the frequency table. We have created a frequency table here with Duke University's Twitter handle as an example. Ask a student to be a volunteer and show the class their Twitter account if you don't have one or you don't want to share your personal account. Our next question says, how many times have you tweeted before school started this year? This is a pretty easy question to answer. The students will just look at the total in the top right part of their frequency table. After that, ask them what percentage of weekday tweets occurred during school hours. This will require them to look at the in-school category, find that percentage, and take the total percentage and divide the 2. So after students have used tweettails to look at their personal data, we're going to have them find a famous person or organization that they follow and review that data. In our case, we're going to look at Duke Basketball's official Twitter page. That Twitter handle is @DukeBluePlanet. And the question we're going to ask is, when do they post the most frequently? As a follow-up, ask them why they think this is the case. In Duke's case, the tweets peak at 11 o'clock p.m. Maybe this is because Duke fans or Twitter users in general look at most of their tweets at night. These types of speculative questions will help your students build a critical framework around which to view statistics. At the end of this activity, ask the students to share their findings with the class. As an exit ticket, you can ask them to write down how the frequency table helped them record and interpret their Twitter postings. Ask them to brainstorm another way where they could use a frequency table to interpret their social media activity. If you have the opportunity to teach this lesson, please take a picture of student work and share it on the Teacher Forums section under Teaching Two Categorical Variables. Thanks so much for watching this video. For more lessons and resources, please see our Additional Resources section. Also go there to find the worksheets that were described in this video. Thanks again.